In the bustling city of Silverton, Ryan worked as an Uber Eats delivery driver. It was a job he did well, navigating the city's streets with ease. One stormy night, he received an order from a new restaurant, Delicacies of the Dark. It was located in a part of town he'd never been to, down narrow, twisting alleys. The restaurant was a small, unassuming place with a peculiar air. The chef, a gaunt man with piercing eyes, handed Ryan a package wrapped in black paper tied with a crimson ribbon. "Deliver it quickly," he whispered. "It's special." Ryan's destination was a dilapidated mansion at the edge of the city. The place felt abandoned, with overgrown gardens and windows like darkened eyes. As he approached the door, it creaked open on its own. Hesitant but committed to his job, Ryan stepped inside, calling out for anyone who might be there. No answer came, only the echo of his own voice. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the air heavy with a sense of dread. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to leave, but he pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable force. In the mansion's heart, he found a dimly lit room. A large, ornate mirror dominated one wall, its surface rippling like liquid. The package in his hand began to shake violently. Overcome by curiosity and fear, Ryan unwrapped it. Inside was not food, but a grotesque, pulsating heart oozing dark blood. Horrified, he dropped the package, and as he did, the mirror's surface swirled and a ghostly figure emerged. The figure was a woman, her eyes hollow, her mouth an open wound. She whispered of being trapped, of needing a living heart to be free. As she spoke, the shadows in the room writhed, and hands reached out toward Ryan. Panic-stricken, Ryan fled, the hands grasping at his heels, the woman's wails echoing in his ears. He burst out of the mansion, the storm now a maelstrom, and didn't stop running until he reached the safety of his apartment. The next day, Ryan tried to find the restaurant again, but where it had stood was just an empty lot. The mansion, too, was nowhere to be found on any map. It was as if both had never existed. Plagued by nightmares, Ryan quit his job. But the terror didn't end. Every stormy night, he would hear a knock at his door and the faint, distant sound of a woman weeping. The echo of the last delivery haunted him, a reminder of the night he glimpsed a world beyond the veil of reality.
Now the second story.
Ethan, a college student in the sleepy town of Elmwood, worked part-time as an Uber Eats delivery driver. His nights were usually uneventful, delivering to familiar addresses and faces. However, one fog-laden October night, he received a peculiar order from an app glitch, no restaurant name, just an address for the delivery and a single item listed as your deepest fear. Intrigued and assuming it was some Halloween prank, Ethan accepted the order. The address led him to the outskirts of Elmwood, to a decrepit house he had never noticed before. Its windows were boarded up, and the garden was overrun with wild thorns. As he approached, the front door creaked open, revealing a dark, empty hallway. Ethan stepped inside, calling out for anyone present. Silence answered him. The air was cold, and a faint, unsettling smell lingered, like decay. The house seemed to groan as he walked through it, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He found himself in a kitchen where an old-fashioned phone sat on the table. It rang suddenly, startling him. Ethan answered, and a hoarse voice whispered, "Leave the package and go. Do not turn around." Ethan noticed a package on the table, wrapped in black paper. He realized it was the same package he had supposedly delivered. Confused and frightened, he dropped the phone and ran back to the entrance. As he reached the door, he heard footsteps behind him, growing louder, closer. He didn't dare look back. Bursting out of the house, he sped away on his bike, not stopping until he reached the safety of his apartment. Once home, Ethan tried to convince himself it was just a prank, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, Ethan decided to investigate. He drove back to the address, but in its place was an empty lot overgrown with weeds. No sign of the house remained. That night, as Ethan tried to sleep, he heard a sound outside his window. Looking out, he saw a figure standing in the street, staring up at his apartment. It was wearing a delivery uniform, just like his, but its face was shrouded in darkness. Every night thereafter, the figure appeared, always watching, never moving. Ethan's orders began to change too. Every delivery led him to deserted locations where the same black package awaited him. Plagued by paranoia and fear, Ethan quit his job, but the midnight visits didn't stop. He knew he was trapped in a cycle he didn't understand, a cycle that began with a mysterious midnight order, an order that delivered not food, but fear itself.
Now the third story.
In the heart of the city, nestled among the bustling streets, was a quiet neighborhood where Julian worked as an Uber Eats delivery driver. One stormy night, Julian received a strange order from an unlisted restaurant simply named The Feast. It was in a part of town he hadn't ventured into before, down narrow, labyrinthine alleys. Arriving at a dimly lit, nondescript building, Julian was handed a package wrapped in old, stained cloth by a figure cloaked in shadows. The figure's voice was a raspy whisper. "Deliver it quickly. It doesn't like to wait." The address led him to an old mansion at the city's edge. The building loomed ominously, its windows dark and lifeless. As Julian approached, the door slowly creaked open on its own. Inside, the mansion was shrouded in darkness, the air stale and heavy with a sense of lingering dread. As he called out, his voice seemed swallowed by the mansion's silence. He ventured further, finding the dining room set for a meal, with one empty chair facing the entrance. Placing the package on the table, Julian turned to leave, but the door had vanished, replaced by a seamless wall. Panic set in as he searched for an exit, each room leading him in circles back to the dining room. The mansion seemed alive, changing around him, trapping him in a nightmarish loop. The package began to move, squirming as if something alive was inside. Then, the whispers started, echoing through the halls, voices that weren't quite human. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision, forms that were human-like but grotesquely distorted. The mansion felt hungry, alive with a malevolent presence. In a desperate attempt, Julian opened the package. Inside, he found a grotesque, decaying heart pulsating and oozing a thick, black substance. The whispers crescendoed into screams, and the shadows converged upon him. Julian woke up outside the mansion, the first light of dawn breaking. The package and the mansion were nowhere to be seen, as if they had never existed. He returned to the city, shaken and disoriented. However, the horror did not end there. Each night, Julian would receive the same order on his app, always from the feast. And every night, he would find himself standing outside the phantom mansion, unable to resist its call. Haunted by the endless cycle, Julian's reality began to unravel. The city around him seemed to warp, the people turning into shadowy figures, whispering unintelligibly. He was trapped in a living nightmare, a pawn in a game played by something beyond comprehension, all stemming from that one last delivery.
Now the fourth story.
In a sprawling metropolis, where the night never sleeps, Adrian worked as an Uber Eats delivery driver. He enjoyed the solitude of the late-night shifts, the city's neon lights his constant companions. One peculiar night, Adrian received an order from a restaurant he'd never heard of before, the Whispering Diner. Its location was in a derelict part of town, long forgotten by the bustling city. Upon arrival, the diner was shrouded in darkness, save for a single flickering light in the kitchen. An eerie figure emerged, handing Adrian a nondescript package with an unsettling smile. "Deliver it quickly, and don't look inside," the figure rasped. The address was to an old apartment building, one that Adrian recalled being condemned years ago. As he approached, the building seemed to groan under its own weight, the windows like watching eyes. The lobby was deserted, with layers of dust and an oppressive, musty odor. Adrian found the apartment number, but as he knocked, the door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black abyss. A cold wind whispered past him, carrying faint, discordant melodies like a music box playing in the distance. Compelled by an unknown force, Adrian stepped inside. His eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, revealing a decrepit living room. The walls were adorned with archaic symbols, and in the center lay a circle of candles, long extinguished. The package in Adrian's hand began to tremble. Overcome with a mix of fear and curiosity, he opened it. Inside was a small, antique music box, its craftsmanship exquisite but ominous. As he wound it up, it played a haunting melody, one that seemed to seep into the very walls of the apartment. Suddenly, the room filled with ghostly apparitions, their faces contorted in silent screams. The symbols on the walls glowed with a sinister light, and the air became thick with the smell of decay. Adrian tried to flee, but the door had vanished. The apparitions circled him, their whispers growing into a cacophony. Each ghostly figure seemed to relive their last moments, their deaths violent and disturbing. In the midst of the chaos, the music box cracked, its melody turning into a piercing screech. As it reached its climax, the apparitions and the room itself dissolved into darkness. Adrian awoke outside the apartment building, the first light of dawn peeking over the horizon. The package was gone, and the Whispering Diner was nowhere to be found on his app. It was as if the night's events had been a terrible dream. But the horror didn't end there. Every night, at the stroke of midnight, Adrian would hear the faint melody of the music box, no matter where he was. And in the shadows, he'd catch glimpses of those ghostly figures, forever bound to the echoes of their last whispers, a haunting reminder of the forgotten order.
Now the fifth story.
The city's nights were alive with sounds and lights, but for Nathan, an Uber Eats driver, they held a monotonous routine. That was until he received a bizarre order from Cafe Obscura, a place he'd never heard of, despite knowing the city like the back of his hand. The order was for a single item, midnight special. Intrigued, Nathan navigated through the city's labyrinthine streets to the given address. It led into an alley he never noticed before, ending at a door with no sign, just a symbol of an eye. Inside, the cafe was shrouded in darkness, lit only by candles, and filled with patrons whose faces were obscured by shadows. The chef, a figure cloaked in darkness, handed Nathan a black box sealed with red wax, bearing the same eye symbol. "Deliver this quickly. And do not open it," he hissed. The delivery address was to an old mansion in the city's outskirts, one rumored to be cursed. As he approached, the mansion seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. The door opened on its own accord, revealing a grand, yet decrepit, foyer shrouded in darkness. Nathan's footsteps echoed through the halls as he searched for the recipient. The air was thick with a putrid smell, and he could hear faint whispers, as if the walls themselves were speaking. He found himself in a dining room where a large mirror hung on the wall. In its reflection, he saw the room not as dilapidated, but lavishly decorated and filled with guests in Victorian garb, their eyes hollow, their smiles grotesque. Shaken, Nathan turned to leave, but the room had changed. The doors were gone, replaced by walls that seemed to close in on him. The whispers grew louder, morphing into agonized screams. Shadows in the corners of the room writhed and twisted, forming faces of torment. The black box in Nathan's hand vibrated violently. Against his better judgment, he opened it. Inside was a human heart, still beating, its rhythm synchronizing with the screams and the pulsating walls. The mirror's reflection changed, showing Nathan standing alone, but behind him stood a figure with eyes as black as the void, its grin wide and unnatural. Nathan spun around, but there was nothing there. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was beside him, its hand reaching out. In a panic, Nathan ran, guided by instinct. He found himself outside, the mansion now silent, the night calm. He drove away, not daring to look back. But the terror didn't end. Each night, at exactly midnight, Nathan's reflection would change, showing the figure standing behind him, closer each time. And in the deepest hours of the night, he'd hear the faint, unmistakable sound of a human heart beating, synchronized with his own.
Now the sixth story.
Nathan, an experienced Uber Eats driver, was no stranger to the late-night streets of his bustling city. One eerie evening, his routine was interrupted by an order from a restaurant he never heard of, the Gourmet Shadow. It was located in an obscure part of town, down a narrow, cobblestone alley he had never noticed before. Arriving at the restaurant, Nathan was greeted by a chilling sight. The building was ancient and decrepit, with vines crawling up its sides. The sign was faded, barely legible. Inside, the restaurant was deserted, save for a solitary figure standing behind the counter, a man with piercing, hollow eyes and a gaunt face. He handed Nathan a package wrapped in black cloth, tied with a string of thorns. "Deliver this quickly," the man whispered, "and do not look inside." The destination was an old mansion at the city's edge, known among locals for its macabre history of unexplained disappearances. As Nathan approached, the mansion seemed to emanate a sense of dread, its windows staring like dark, empty eyes. Pushing through his rising fear, Nathan knocked on the massive front door, which creaked open on its own. The interior was shrouded in darkness, dust swirling in the air. A grand staircase spiraled upwards, leading to shadowy corridors. Nathan's footsteps echoed through the halls as he searched for the recipient. The air grew colder, heavier, as if breathing became more difficult. He could hear faint whispers, the words indiscernible, but filled with malice. Entering the dining room, he found a table set for one, lit by a single candle. Its flame flickered as if dancing to an unheard rhythm. Placing the package on the table, he turned to leave, but the layout of the mansion had changed, the doors and windows sealing shut, trapping him inside. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a voice that seemed to come from the very walls. "Open the package," it hissed. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Nathan unwrapped the package. Inside was a mirror, its surface swirling with a smoky haze. Peering into it, he saw not his reflection, but a series of disturbing images, shadowy figures with twisted faces, scenes of unspeakable horrors, and a dark entity with eyes like black holes. The mirror fell from his hands, shattering on the ground. As it did, the house trembled, and the shadows in the room grew darker, stretching towards him like grasping hands. The voice laughed, a sound that chilled Nathan to his core. Fleeing the room, Nathan found himself lost in a labyrinth of corridors, each turn leading him deeper into the mansion's heart. Portraits on the walls seemed to watch him, their eyes following his every move. After what seemed like hours, he stumbled upon a hidden library. There, he found a journal, its pages yellowed with age. It told of the mansion's dark history, of a cult that worshipped an ancient entity, and of a ritual that required a living sacrifice. Realizing the gravity of his situation, Nathan searched for a way out. He discovered a series of underground tunnels beneath the mansion, their walls lined with archaic symbols. Following them, he emerged into the night, the mansion looming behind him, its presence oppressive and menacing. Nathan reported his experience to the authorities, But when they investigated, the mansion was gone, as if it had never existed. The restaurant, the Gourmet Shadow, was also nowhere to be found. Haunted by the night's events, Nathan quit his job, but the horrors he witnessed followed him. Every night, he heard the whispers, saw the shadowy figures in his dreams, and felt the gaze of unseen eyes upon him. He knew then that he had become part of the mansion's tormented legacy, a legacy that would never let him go, a final delivery that was never meant to be completed.